Natalia listened to the journalist without being able to say anything. She suspected that the idea of bringing her child to work would not be exciting for her colleague. "Excuse us, please," Natalia murmured when Victoria had calmed down a bit and stopped talking. "You know that at the moment I don't have anyone to leave Adrian with. Theodora is sick and I can't take my son to daycare with our schedule. I had no choice but to bring him here." Victoria gave the boy such a chilling look that he cringed and hid behind his mother. "He's not sick?" the woman asked suspiciously. "Although what am I going to ask him? Children are always sick with something. And I don't need a runny nose and a cough right now. I'm going on vacation in a week." "My son isn't sick," Natalia said calmly. "Won't it bother you? You won't even notice? Won't you, Adrian?" The boy nodded. He looked at Victoria with such a frightened expression that Natalia felt sorry for him. Leaving him in the company of her angry roommate was cruel, but she had no choice. She had to clean the rooms on the first floor, but she couldn't bring her son upstairs. She didn't want the landlord to notice the intruder and fire her. Natalia had worked very hard to get this job, and losing it would devastate her. Natalia sat her son by the window at the table where Laura, the cook, used to cut the salads. She put a sketchbook and colored pencils in front of him and smiled. "Be a good boy and keep quiet. Don't disturb Victoria's work, and I'll be here soon. Will you draw our cat for me?" "Yes," the boy whispered. "Well done," Natalia said. Adrian looked so scared that it was clear that in his mother's absence the boy wouldn't move or make noise so as not to anger the furious woman at the sink. Natalia looked angrily at Victoria, and why couldn't she be a little nicer to the boy, whatever sins Natalia accused herself of? But taking it out on the boy was wrong and just plain stupid. It was a shame Laura had taken the day off. Surely the old cook wouldn't have mistreated the baby, and surely she would have found something to occupy him. Victoria scrubbed the sink as hard as if she wanted to break it. Natalia made a sign to her son and left. She wanted to finish her work quickly and get back to the kitchen. She felt that this would not end well. This day, she set to cleaning with unprecedented enthusiasm. At first, she vacuumed the master's room. Natalia always cleaned this room first because it was creepy, like a crypt. The burgundy wallpaper made the room look cramped and oppressive. The heavy curtains that didn't let in a ray of sunlight. The paintings on the table. As she passed them, Natalia looked away. The people depicted in them had long since died, his wife, his children. Natalia dusted them off without looking and hurried away. Sometimes she thought that the relatives of the owner of the house blamed her for his death, and if she thought about it, in some ways, they were right. Natalia tidied Salvador's room, finished with her sons, and tiptoed through the study where the owner of the house worked. She could finish on the first floor and go to the first floor, and at the same time, check on Adrian and Victoria. The girl's fears were confirmed. She heard her partner's screams as she came down the stairs. "You can't be left alone for a second. Why did you go there?" Natalia quickened her pace and almost flew into the kitchen just in time. Victoria was hovering over the boy with a ferocious fury, and from the look on Adrian's face, it was clear that he was about to burst into tears. "What happened?" Natalia exhaled, running towards her son and shielding him from her partner. Victoria glared at her. "Can't you see for yourself? He broke the glass." As soon as she left the kitchen for a moment to answer the bell, your brat walked over to the sink. "Why did you go in there? I told you to sit in the corner and keep your head down." Natalia looked questioningly at the boy, who whispered. He was thirsty. "Do you see?" Natalia asked, turning to her companion. Adrian just wanted to drink water. There was nothing criminal in his actions. Victoria almost choked with rage. How could she not? Now the glass is broken. Do you think the owner won't notice? And who will be responsible? "Salvador won't count the glasses, you know that," Natalia said quietly. "And besides, there are more guests than ever in this house. No one will miss them. And if they find out, you can blame me." I'll say that I broke them. I'll go tell them right now. Victoria nodded. You do a lot of things. You bring your son here as if it were a private daycare. He breaks the plates and it's like nothing happened to you. You're not the lady here, remember? Victoria tore off her apron, raised her head proudly, and left the kitchen, apparently to carry out her threat. Natalia looked sadly at her son. Here we are, Adrian. Forgive me, mother, the boy murmured. Natalia stroked his head. Come on, who doesn't? Not many people have such an angry teacher, so you're my hero. Not everyone can keep up with him for an hour. Stay here for a while. Quiet as a mouse, okay? I want to see where he went. Just as Natalia had feared, Victoria went straight to the owner of the house, to his office, where the man was sorting out some work documents. Salvador, may I? Victoria's voice changed instantly and became soft, as it always was when she addressed her boss. Come in, the man said curtly. Natalia waited for her partner to disappear into the office and approached the door. She was well aware that eavesdropping on this was not good, but she couldn't help it. There were two destinies at stake, hers and her son's. Salvador, I'm here because there's an important matter. You see, it's become completely impossible to work in this house. Why? Did it get too dirty? Or did Sancho give you a hard time? No, not at all, Victoria exclaimed hastily. It has nothing to do with you. Such a perfect boss is hard to find. I'm talking about Natalia. Natalia what? Salvador asked irritably. Victoria, you know, I don't have time to solve your riddles. I have work to do. About Natalia, your maid. And what did she do? She brought her son home, Victoria said plaintively. How do you think you're going to bring a child into your house? What if he'd behaved normally? He would have gone into the closet without asking and he wouldn't have broken a glass. He knocked something on the table. Victoria, stop it. I don't have time to listen to this nonsense. If that child starts playing with matches and sets my house on fire, let them come and report him, but don't bother me with nonsense. A glass? Are you ruining my multi-million-dollar deal with a glass? Victoria stormed out of the office and ran, clicking her heels furiously. Natalia breathed a sigh of relief. Lucky. But how long would it last? In Salvador's house, the girl felt like she was in a minefield. Everything here was dangerous for her. And how had Natalia gotten into this situation? After all, just a couple of years ago, everything was going well. The girl came to the city from the countryside to go to university, and in her home village, she stayed with her elderly mother. Cherubina gave birth to Natalia late when she was already over 40. She raised her daughter alone and worked a lot, which made her age prematurely. Cherubina had a lot of illnesses and a cane. Her joints were bothering her, she could barely move, and the garden was half neglected. Her daughter couldn't cope with everything. That's why Natalia didn't want to leave her mother alone. If something happened, who would help her? Mom, I'm not going anywhere, she said, after finishing her studies. What haven't I seen in the city? Tall houses, factory chimneys, and traffic jams. I'll stay here with you. Cherubina looked reproachfully at her daughter. Are you crazy? What are you going to do here? You have to study, work. Natalia waved her hand casually. I can also work here as a postwoman, for example. I'll get a job at the post office delivering newspapers, romance, and fresh air. There is no romance here. Her mother scolded her. In the cold, in the mud, wandering the streets. If everything here turns into a swamp after the first rain comes, and how long do you walk with a post bag if the village is dying? The farm is closed. The poultry farm will soon be buried. Everyone will move away. There are 5 houses with old people left, and they don't need you with your position. Mark my words. Mother, you are a pessimist. Natalia sighed. What do you expect me to do? Leave you here like a traitor and drive off into the middle of nowhere? The city is not far, Cherub said calmly. It's only an hour away. I'm not too old to be looked after, and I don't need a nurse. You can study in the city and come visit me on holidays and weekends too if you want. But why are you angry, as if we were breaking up forever? Sometimes with persuasion and cunning, but her mother forced her daughter to go to the city. Natalia did well in school. She was considered one of the best graduates, and staying in the village with its inhabitants was foolish. Cherubina believed that her daughter was born for something much bigger than the countryside, and she insatiably persuaded her to change her mind. Natalia agreed with her mother's arguments and applied for admission to the institute. The girl thought that she could always get a job at the post office, especially since her best friend Camilla echoed her mother's persuasion. "Cherubina is right. What else is there to do here?" said the girl, shaking her head condemningly. "There are only old people left in the village. The cultural center is closed. Even the library is empty because there is no one working there. Where are you going to find a boyfriend here? Are you going to marry an old man?" Natalia laughed. "What boyfriends, Camilasha? What's wrong with you? I'm wondering what to study and you want to marry me. This is not the point now." "A young girl should always worry about that," Camilla said sarcastically. "And where else is there the best supply of guys than at university? Not at school, not after work. You have to seize the moment." Natalia couldn't say that this talk about boyfriends inspired her. At the village school where she studied, there were no princes or knights, and Natalia herself was a modest girl. She didn't wear bright makeup, no suitors circled around her. The only one who paid attention to Natalia was Sabino, a shy student always immersed in books and talking about lofty subjects. Camilla laughed at him. "What did you see in him?" she asked her friend. "He was a walking encyclopedia. You could die of boredom with a guy like that." Natalia shrugged. "I'm not going to marry him. We're just friends." "Yes? And I heard from Sabino that he calls you his girlfriend." As if he meant it. This message turned out to be rather unpleasant news for Natalia. She hated people gossiping behind her back. And coming out with such nonsense, well, it was absolutely crazy. Nevertheless, Sabino continued to behave as usual. He didn't pester her with insinuations. He just pretended to be a walking encyclopedia. He talked to the girl about space, told her about plans in the future, and told her that he intended to become an academic. Gradually, Natalia calmed down. Maybe the guy didn't say such a thing. Maybe her friend confused everything. Anyway, next to Sabino, she felt familiar and relaxed, like one feels in old shoes that are comfortable to walk in. Natalia continued to talk to her boyfriend like an old friend, and everyone was happy. She was looking for another relationship. She came to the city to study, so romance could wait. The main thing for Natalia was not to disappoint her cherubic mother, who was waiting for her. Natalia enrolled in economics with the secret hope of returning to the village soon and settling there, replacing the old Gavina in the accounting department. Her best friend Camilla was by her side. They even shared a dormitory, which seemed like a miracle to the girls. Sabino, on the other hand, had gone to study biology and had moved to another dormitory to the relief of Camilla, who couldn't stand him. Neither fish nor meat. She grumbled one day, looking at the boy with a look of contempt. "You'd better reject him. He's a slimy bastard who can't do you any good," Camilla said. "This is embarrassing," Natalia muttered. "I've known him since childhood. We grew up on the same street," Camilla said. "You could have found some geek with glasses and talked to him about higher things, as if he were an old man who can't have fun." Her friend was right. Sabino was immersed in his studies. He did not participate in any student activities, and those who went to all kinds of parties were disparagingly called partygoers. Wasting precious time, shaking his head, he said, "Well, it's better for me while everyone drinks and dances. I will become a better student. I will submit more papers, write articles, participate in contests. Teachers will notice me, and then I will go to university." "Right, Natalia." The girl muttered something vague in response. She didn't drink alcohol and only went to parties with her friend, but she wasn't inclined to study without a break. Sometimes, after a hard day of studying and a lot of written work, When Natalia's head was spinning with numbers and calculations, she just needed to relax a little, to forget for a moment about the fact that she was a diligent student and feel like a young lady. Camilla diligently helped her with that. Tomorrow is Manfredo's birthday. They are celebrating it at the country house. It's not far from the city. Shall we go? It will be great. If you don't want to dance, we'll at least take a walk. The weather is great and there is a forest nearby, a river. Maybe we will even get some sun. Manfredo? Sabino asked. I hear that name every day. The girls in our group are crazy about him. They talk about how he looks with his new hairdo. I've seen his picture. He's just a guy. No intelligence in his eyes. Nothing to do with it. Well, of course you do it better. Camilla smiled and turned to Natalia. Shall we go? She didn't know if she wanted to go or not. Sabino warned, don't even think about it. Let's go to the cinema. They say there is a war drama. It will be interesting to see it. What are you going to do at the country house with those alcoholics? The contemptuous tone in which the boy spoke settled the matter. Natalia looked at him indignantly and said, they are not alcoholics at all. They are quite normal guys. Ignacio likes rock climbing. Isidoro is also getting a second university degree, studying day and night. Manfredo has a dignified bearing, doesn't bother the girls, and always makes decent jokes. You don't know anyone, and you insult them. You're lost. Sabino immediately became sad and lowered his gaze. Well, okay, sorry. I was wrong. I just think it's all a frivolous waste of time. Camilla squinted her eyes covertly. And you've never gone out with us, right? Well, I'm inviting you. Can you go to the cabin, have fun, meet the guys? There won't be anyone to meet, Sabino said. That's not true. Camilla shook her head. By the way, Victor Alvarez is coming too. Alvarez? Alvarez? The dean's relative? The boy wondered. I choose. You see, it's good to go to parties. You can make friends for life. You're right. Sabino nodded enthusiastically. I think I'll go now. Tomorrow then, huh? Thanks for inviting me, girls. Well, I have to go. I have some work to finish. Bye-bye. The guy walked away with his funny bouncing walk that always made Camilla laugh. Natalia looked at her friend reproachfully. Why did you invite him? You yourself said he was boring. Parties are more fun with nerds like that. Camilla winked at her. Don't worry. We'll go to the cabin and pretend we don't know each other. But it wouldn't be very nice. Natalia hesitated. I'm afraid your friends will hurt him. That's the news. Camilla smiled. You yourself said all the guys are decent. Who would hurt him? If Manfred makes jokes, poor Sabino could get hurt. They wouldn't kill him anyway. Camilla shook her off. Don't worry. He's quite happy too, you see. He can't wait for the dean's son to call him his buddy. Let's give him a chance. They drove Patricia, one of their friends, to the country house. The girl's car was a small foreign car. Sabino was the only boy in the group and he annoyed everyone. He complained incessantly about the cramped quarters, the stale air and the claustrophobia. Listen, academic, Camilla said. Then you'd better walk. The guy didn't understand the humor. 20 kilometers, you're crazy. Then don't complain. Did you want to meet Victor Alvarez? I did. Here, bear it. Sabino looked at Natalia, sitting next to him, and sighed heavily. I only went there for you, he whispered. Natalia smiled tensely. Of course, Sabino understood. They were the first to arrive at the party. When the guests had just begun to gather, Manfredo came out to meet them, and Natalia held out her gift. Here. He handed her a small box and smiled. Happy birthday. I hope you like it. Thank you, miss. The boy nodded. I'm sure you will. A gift from such a pretty girl can't be bad. The master of the house left to join the other guests, and Sabino asked jealously, What was that just now? What did you give her? Camila rolled her eyes tiredly. Relax, Sabino. There would be no gold or diamonds. It was a normal netsug. Netsug? Netsug, the boy asked, bewildered. It's a Buddhist statuette. What does he need it for? Manfredo collects these things, Natalia explained. Everyone knows him, so we bought one to make him happy. That's all. Sabino smiled with satisfaction and walked away. Natalia sighed. What did I tell you? Her friend smiled. It'll be fun, you'll see. The guests slowly arrived at the house, and the party gained momentum. They turned on the music, started dancing. Natalia took a drink with a non-alcoholic cocktail and watched with a smile. She liked the excitement. It distracted her from the grayness of everyday life and excited her soul. The only problem was Sabino. Just as Natalia had feared, she followed her and expressed her displeasure. What kind of vacation is this? She grumbled. There was laughter all around. No one wants to talk. And Alvarez isn't here. He probably didn't even know about the party. Camilla lied to me. What do you mean he's not here? Camilla said right away. He's here. You have to look for him more. Do you see those guys on the corner over there? Alvarez is among them. Go and impress them. Sabino looked suspiciously in the direction she was pointing and asked, what are they doing there? Competing to see who drinks the most. So if you're a real man, show yourself. Come on, come on. Put Alvarez on his shoulder blades. Sabino blushed, paled, but did not move from his seat. Natalia intervened in place of her friend. Come on, Camilla. Leave him alone. He's never taken a gram of alcohol in his mouth. What does he have to do with a competition like this? Oh, I forgot. Camilla pretended to sigh. Well, another day then. She'll meet Alvarez in a more formal setting when they're both wearing ties. No. I'll go, Sabino muttered. It's an opportunity not to be missed. With his legs tangled together, he began to make his way through the crowd towards the boys. Natalia tried to stop him, but it was in vain. He didn't listen to her. Everything will be fine, he reassured her. You'll see, I'll beat them all. I have the right genes. The genes, Camilla wondered when Sabino had left. His grandfather was an alcoholic, Natalia muttered bitterly. Didn't you know? That's why Sabino doesn't like alcohol, parties and such. God, why did he go there? We won't be able to drag him to the hostel. Don't panic before you know it, Camilla reassured her. Have they told you about the grandfather? If what you say is true, Sabino should be able to handle himself. Natalia watched the boy anxiously. Camilla wanted to drag him to the dance, but the girl lost all desire to have fun. We shouldn't have done this, she muttered. Camilla finally pulled away from her. Okay, I'm not going to convince you. You can find me if you want. Natalia nodded absent-mindedly. The scene in the corner of the living room had all her attention. Sabino was easily accepted into their circle. He was grinning stupidly and clearly trying to suck up to Alvarez to gain his attention. Natalia was outraged to see such a scene. Did Sabino have no pride at all? And the endless speeches about how he would achieve everything with his mind and become an academic. Was it all just talk? The guy drank a glass, then a second, a third. The audience cheered him on while Sabino barely kept himself on his feet and bowed to the audience like an actor after a performance. Natalia tried to approach him, to take him out into the fresh air, but stopped. Hadn't he chosen all this himself? The girl was not herself in disappointment. It was getting dark. Natalia wanted to get as far away from the crowd as possible from this party, or even better, at home, in her bed, with her mother by her side. The room was quiet, and there were no drunk guests around, except that it was all a fantasy. Who would take her home, and even to the city? Patricia got lost in the crowd, and Natalia didn't know any other drivers. Yes, and she wouldn't ask someone to take her when the party was in full swing. She wanted to distract herself. She went down to the garden and strolled among the trees. The green landscape calmed her and gave her a feeling of security, like she was at home. It felt good. She leaned against a tree and closed her eyes. She had already decided that she would survive this night, But her peace of mind was not going to last. Somewhere nearby, a twig snapped, and a drunken voice said, "Look who I found. What are you doing here, darling? Everyone at home is having fun, and you are alone." Natalia barely contained a groan. But why was everything falling on her head? First that fool Sabino entering a stupid contest, and now this. The girl turned to leave, but the stranger grabbed her by the arm. "What? Not even a chat? You are being rude." Natalia was really scared now. It was impossible to see the boy in the twilight, but he was shaped like a cupboard. "Let me go. I don't want to talk to you." "Why not?" The stranger laughed. Natalia tugged at his arm again and somehow managed to escape. She ran back towards her house, towards the saving light of the living room. The boy followed on her heels. "Leave me alone," Natalia shouted. The house was getting closer. Behind one of the windows, the girl saw Sabino, and he seemed to be staring at him. Natalia waved her hands in panic, drawing attention to herself, but the friend smiled stupidly and stepped away from her. The stranger reached for her again as Natalia beckoned to her friend. "Yes, I won't eat you. Come, let's talk. I won't eat you." "Why are you angry?" Natalia prepared to scream, though she didn't expect anyone in the house to be able to hear her over all that music. "Macario, let go of the girl." A voice came from outside the house. Natalia looked around. She had never seen the guy who had helped her, though perhaps it wasn't the first time. Who would have thought? In the dim light of the street, she could only make out that the boy had blonde hair and fairly regular features. The stranger holding her hand laughed. "Who are you to me? A commander? An educator? Get out of here before I punch you. For the last time I warn you," the blonde man said with a threatening tone in his voice. The big man kept laughing. With a good blow, the blonde punched him in the face. The laughter stopped. The big man who had grabbed Natalia let go of his victim and sat on the floor swallowing saliva. "Are you okay?" the blonde asked, looking at her. "I think so." Natalia stammered, trembling. "Oh, there's no way to know. Let me take you inside. Have a drink. You'll calm down." "No, I don't want to go in." Natalia shook her head. She remembered Sabino, Camilla, who had started this whole mess, and suddenly realized that she didn't want to see any of them. "Where do you want to go?" "Home," Natalia whispered, and suddenly burst into tears. The blonde was surprised. "What happened? Did Macario hurt you?" "No," Natalia murmured. "I'm having a bad day." "I know," the boy nodded. "I have those days too. So do you want to get out of here?" "Why, you don't want to be here either." She looked surprised. "No," the blonde nodded. "I don't know anyone else around here, apart from the boar Macario, Manfredo, and a few others, so I don't see any reason to stay." Natalia smiled shyly. "Let's go then." The blonde led her to the outskirts of the property, where many of the guests had left their cars. The boy's car impressed Natalia. She didn't know much about cars, but this was a foreign car, and not a cheap one. "I don't even feel comfortable in it," she said modestly. "It's okay." The boy reassured her. "Macario used to ride here, but after what he did today, that's not the kind of passenger I want." "Is he a friend of yours?" Natalia asked. The blonde shook his head. "I wish. He's a friend of my brother. My brother asked me to take Macario with me, since he's depressed, so we could have some fun. And he has fun, you've seen him. I spent the whole night looking after him, keeping him away from bottles and girls. Thanks for coming to my rescue. My name is Natalia." "And you?" "Natan. I'm sorry I didn't introduce myself right away." They were on the road and the girl bit her tongue. She lost her speech for a moment, but then she pulled herself together and said, "Where are we going so fast?" "Is it too fast?" Nathan wondered. "It's not the word. The trees beside the road are blurry. Slow down, please. It's very scary." Nathan slowed down and said apologetically, "Sorry, I wasn't thinking. I always drive like this. It's a habit. Are you a race car driver? The girl stuttered and asked. Something like that. The boy smiled. I don't like to live slowly. I'm always in a hurry. You have to make the most of every moment or else life will pass you by before you know it. I think if you drive the way you drive, life can end faster, Natalia said. Life in general is a dangerous thing. Nathan winked. Whatever you choose, you'll end up dead. So why are you afraid of death? And why do you think about it beforehand? Are you a philosopher? Natalia commented. But let's talk about something more cheerful, shall we? Talking about death is of no use in the dark, not after what happened. Okay? Tell me about yourself. Who are you? Where do you live? And how did you end up at the party tonight? I was surprised to see you in the garden while everyone was having fun and dancing. Did you go into the solitude and darkness? Don't you like big crowds? The girl thought for a while and confessed. No, probably because I grew up in the countryside. There was an abandoned house nearby. The neighbors who lived across the street only came in the summer. It's that kind of environment where you don't get used to the noise. Everything becomes unnecessary. Nathan smiled. It's the same at home. It's not that I live in the country, no. But since my mother and brother died, my father has been locked away, and we don't have many visitors. So I got used to the silence. Even on the road, I drive without music. What's the use of music when there's wind in the window? They spent the whole trip talking like that. Natalia was totally enthralled. She had never had such a companion. Their thoughts on completely different things were exactly the same. Sabino never agreed with her. On the contrary, he was always arguing and proving his point. Camilla dismissed all these lofty arguments as nonsense. Unexpectedly, at a random party, she found someone who was easy to talk to without having to choose the right words or topics of conversation. That night she couldn't sleep, even though Nathan took her to the hostel around 11. After being reprimanded by the sleepy concierge, Natalia went to her room. She spent the night awake staring at the ceiling and repeating in her mind every sentence that Nathan and she had said. In the morning, when she could barely fall asleep, the door swung open, making Natalia jump in her bed. Camilla was standing on the threshold. "Look at her," said her friend angrily. "He called her almost crazy with alarm and she is asleep. Do you know that Sabino and I spent the whole night calling hospitals and morgues? The boys spent midnight in the woods looking for you? And Sabino was still capable of looking for someone?" Natalia muttered in her sleep. "Don't joke like that," said Camilla reproachfully. "You don't want to know. He sobered up as soon as he found out you had disappeared. And when he saw me at the window being harassed by a drunk, he immediately moved away," said Natalia, wrapping her arms around her knees. She remembered the events of the previous night and shuddered again. How would it have ended if Nathan hadn't shown up? The drunken bully? Camilla immediately lowered her tone and looked at her frightened. "You're scaring me. Tell me more about what happened." "I was bored in the house. I wanted to get some fresh air," said Natalia. "I went out into the garden. I went for a walk, and a big drunk guy jumped on me. He grabbed my arm and wanted to take me somewhere. I started screaming. So what, was I scared?" Camilla nervously started talking to her. "I don't think so." Natalia smiled. He didn't. He didn't until the other forced him. Nathan came and saved me, and I went to the city with him." Camilla whistled in surprise. "Nathan? That's interesting now. Do I know this Superman? What group is he from?" "I don't know." Natalia shrugged. "We haven't talked about his studies. I think he's graduating from college next year. That's all I know about him." "What did you talk about, friend? I don't recognize you." The Natalia I know wasn't her studies self. I would have asked about the boy's education first, what his favorite subject was. The nerd seems to have disappeared. Natalia smiled. "Yes, you never cease to amaze me, my friend." Camilla smiled back and went into detail about last night's party. Sabino, When he heard that the girl had been found, wanted to visit her too, but Natalia refused to see him. "I don't want to see you or talk to you ever again," she said angrily. "First you put on that whole show with the drink. What do you mean? That you won everyone over? A great achievement. And then, when I needed your help more than ever in my life, you turned your back on me and went off to laugh with your new colleagues. What is that called? What are you talking about?" Sabina was shocked. "When did I ever turn my back on you?" Natalia could see from the look on his face that he didn't remember anything that had happened. Maybe he hadn't even seen her in the darkness of the garden. She couldn't turn back. Her anger towards Sabina wouldn't calm down. "You know, it's all over between us," Natalia said. "Don't follow me, and don't tell me how to live my life. Yesterday I saw that all your lessons are useless and you don't even follow them. So, I'm sorry, we're not friends anymore. I can't stand two-faced people." And no matter how much Sabina apologized, almost crying, Natalia couldn't forgive him. She tried, but every time she saw that scene before her eyes, the laughing Sabina at the window, the traitor, abandoning her in a moment of danger, her stomach turned. When they parted at the bedroom door, Natalia and Nathan exchanged phone numbers, but the girl never thought the boy would call her, at least not so soon. Nathan called her the next day and asked, "How are you? Have you recovered from yesterday? After the attack of the great Macario or after your madness?" Natalia asked mischievously. "After all at once." Nathan laughed. "A long time ago?" she replied. "So you are ready for new adventures?" the boy commented with satisfaction. "Get ready. In 2 hours I will be there and we will start turning you into a human being." "What do you mean?" Natalia worried. "We will train you for any situation. Maybe we'll even teach you how to fight so you can defend yourself if some big guy comes at you again. But first, we're going to get you up to speed, because you were going a measly 150 kilometers per hour like you were on a roller coaster. It might not be that scary on a roller coaster." Natalia laughed. "But I agree. Where do we start learning?" "Cycling. You're a total coward. A speed of 23 kilometers is a good place to start." "Where are you going?" Camilla asked curiously, watching her friend rummage through her closet for suitable clothes. "I'll go by bike," Natalia replied from the depth of the closet. "Wow," Camilla shook her head. "You haven't sat on a bike for 10 years. If I'm wrong, you must have fallen in love with him to risk your life so much." Natalia wasn't afraid, as she had always understood that skates, bicycles, and skateboards were too extreme an activity to be worth staying away from. But for the company of Nathan, she was willing to do anything. They arrived at the dock and rented a couple of bikes. The sight of these two-wheeled monsters that looked bigger than they really were gave her chills. Nathan gave her a short briefing that Natalia didn't remember a word of, and he looked at her intently. "Can you manage?" The girl nodded. After all, they say you can't unlearn how to ride if you've already done it once. Although she remembered how many times she had fallen due to her lack of attention. That was how it was now. At first, Natalia was riding pretty well and even picked up speed, enjoying the warm wind. But then, as soon as she lost her guard, she immediately flew across the asphalt. A worried Nathan dropped his bike and ran towards her. "Are you hurt?" "It was nothing," the girl said, wrinkling his nose. "I scraped my knee a little, but it barely hurts." "A scratch?" Nathan exclaimed. "You have a real war wound here. Take my hand, get up and let's go." The man's hand was warm and firm. He apologized non-stop as she walked towards the car, and Natalia felt embarrassed. "It was my fault. I was staring at a funny pug being walked by a girl. I should have kept my eyes on the road, but the idea of the bikes was mine." Nathan objected. "I should have asked you out to a cafe like all normal guys do." Natalia didn't understand anything. She was flattered that Nathan had called her ride a date. At the same time, she didn't know how to behave. All she knew about the dates was that she had taken long, tedious walks with Sabino, during which her childhood friend did nothing but recite scientific data. As they drove to Nathan's house, Natalia's panic increased even more. "I'm not going to your house," she whispered. "Why not?" the boy asked. "Shouldn't we stop the walk to take care of your wound?" "Yes, but I thought we were going to the hospital." "At the hospital, we'll wait in line for hours. Besides, my house is closer," Nathan explained. "Don't worry, Mrs. Theodora knows more about bruises than any doctor. You'll be in good hands." Natalia didn't know Mrs. Theodora, and that wasn't what worried her the most. Going to the house, she remembered many warnings Camilla had given her. Don't take the word of anyone you know. Don't go anywhere with him. And God willing, don't cross the threshold of his house. Natalia violated all these points one by one and ended up not at any ordinary house, but at a real 3-story mansion. The house looked like a castle, but she didn't feel like a princess, but like a Cinderella. She didn't belong here. "Mrs. Theodora, can I see you for a moment?" Nathan shouted as he entered the room. "We need you more than ever in our lives." Footsteps were heard on the stairs. I'm coming," said a thin, elderly woman as she descended to the ground floor. When she saw Natalia, she smiled amiably. "We have guests today. What a surprise." "Mrs. Theodora, they are not guests. They are a patient," Nathan corrected her. "Look what happened to his knee." The woman drew attention to the hole in his pants and clicked her tongue. "We need to treat her now. Let's go to the kitchen." The girl went after the mysterious Mrs. Theodora. "My name is Natalia." The girl introduced herself. "Mrs. Theodora." The woman smiled. "I am the housekeeper of this house. I have been working here for 20 years. I have known Nathan and his brother since they were little, so I have become like an aunt to both of them." She treated the girl's wound with iodine and put a clean bandage on it. Then she smiled. "That's it. You can start running again." "Nathan and I didn't run. We rode bikes." Natalia corrected her and sighed. "He probably won't ask me to go anywhere now. I really disappointed him." Mrs. Theodora shook her head. "That can't be true. Believe me, I know he wouldn't let just anyone into his house. If that's happened, it means you're valuable to him." "Is that so?" the girl asked hopefully. "Absolutely." Mrs. Theodora nodded. Footsteps were heard in the hallway, and a man who looked like Sabino, thin, hunched and wearing glasses, entered the kitchen. He noticed the girl and stood in the doorway. "Meet Sancho," said Mrs. Theodora. "This is Natalia, Nathan's guest." "Are you wearing the bandage?" said Sancho instead of greeting her, accidentally noticing the white bandage. "I fell off my bike," the girl explained, blushing. "But it was Nathan who asked you to ride a bike, wasn't it? My advice to you, if you want to live your life in peace, stay away from my brother. You'll be safer." She grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge and left the kitchen. Natalia looked questioningly at Mrs. Theodora. "What was that?" "They don't get along," the woman sighed. "But why?" the girl wondered. Theodora shrugged her shoulders. "They're different. Nathan doesn't stay still for a day. He's always going somewhere looking for adventures. Sancho, on the other hand, is a homebody. He buries himself in books. He can't leave his room for a week. He doesn't need anything else. When the children were little, they often argued about it. Now nothing has changed. Sancho can't understand his brother. He's different, you know." Natalia didn't understand and didn't want to understand sincerely. She was in love, and no other boy was worthy of her attention except Nathan. They continued to meet, but without the extreme. There were no more bicycles, no skates, nothing. Nathan agreed that Natalia was not a thrill-seeker, but a coward. They went to the cinema, to some cafes, and went out of town if time permitted. Camilla was terribly jealous of her friend. "What luck? What luck?" she said. "The car, the house, and your Nathan has a handsome face. Not like Sabino, he's perfect, right?" No, I don't need his money for anything. Natalia was embarrassed. I love Natan, and I don't care if he's rich or poor. Everyone says so, Camila said sideways. And it's better to have money, isn't it? It's nicer to live in a big house than in a small one. You can go further and further in a good car, etc. Natalia became gloomy. Her friend looked at her and wondered. Come on, I didn't mean anything by that. I don't think you're one of those girls who are just looking for a guy for money. I believe you, Camilla. Natalia smiled. Don't worry, that's not what bothers me. What is it about? Her friend asked her. Are you having some kind of breakup in your relationship and you haven't told me? No, the relationship is fine, Natalia murmured. I'm just worried, you know. Natan likes danger, driving fast, trips to the mountains, where he said they go rock climbing. So what is it? Camilla asked. Many guys are like that. Well, if you think about Sabino, but this guy has always been the exception to the rule. But it's Natan. If something happens to him, I won't survive what would happen to him, asked Camilla. He has been driving for a long time and he doesn't go to the mountains very often, and even less now that he's tied up with you. Don't get nervous deep down. Natalia recognized that her friend was right, but she was still worried. Natan was in such a hurry to live that he didn't take care of himself. Something bad was going to happen to her. Natalia's premonition had not deceived her. Later, she regretted that her fears had brought her misfortune. Camilla assured her that she had nothing to do with it, but that didn't matter. Nothing could be changed. The misfortune occurred on a grey November day when nothing good could be expected anyway. In the morning, Natalia had tried to call Nathan. She had sent him messages, but there was no answer. The girl was exhausted, restless at her desk in class, and she attracted the teacher's attention. Go out into the hallway, he ordered Natalia with a stern look. Anyway, you don't seem to be interested in the lecture. Any other day, Natalia would have started apologizing and trying her best to stay in the classroom, but now she wasn't going to do that. She couldn't wait to make sure her boyfriend was okay. Natalia's phone rang before she could get out of the hallway. The teacher had gone on another angry rant, and Natalia slammed the door behind her and answered the phone in fear. Hey, Nathan! I'm so glad you called. I'm going crazy with worry. She was expecting to hear Nathan's soft voice, which she had grown accustomed to for a long time. She would have been glad if he had called her a panicked child or a coward. However, the voice coming from the phone was not the boy's at all. Is Natalia Nathan's girlfriend? Yes, who are you? Mrs. Theodora, I hope you remember me. Natalia's anxiety was growing by the dozen. Why had the housekeeper called her? Why did the woman have his phone? Where is Nathan? She asked in fear. Why are you calling from his phone? What's the matter? The woman hesitated. The house is so hectic today that I decided to do some unscheduled cleaning to calm my nerves. And I heard the call in Nathan's room. It seems he left his phone at home. 40 missed calls. You've been calling over and over again, I know, so I thought calling you back would be good. Someone had to do it anyway. Who but me? It's not like Nathan's father found out about you, don't worry. Report what? Natalia asked. Nathan had had an accident tonight. The woman sighed heavily. He was supposedly going to pick something up at a friend's house and was driving too fast as usual. But he's alive, Natalia shouted. I'm sorry, Natalia, but no, Mrs. Theodora muttered. You can't survive at that speed. The car on the driver's side was crushed. Natan died instantly. He didn't even feel pain. Natalia dropped the phone from her weakened fingers, swayed, and sat down on a bench. The doorbell rang in the hallway. Camilla, who had left the office, ran straight to her. So, is everything okay? She shook her head. I heard Pablo Velasco. He was talking about you for the rest of class. Camilla saw the expression on her friend's face and looked away. What happened? Have they told you anything about Natan? Natan died, Natalia whispered. What? Camilla was shocked. Do you think I don't remember the melody you put on his number? I memorized it by heart. What happened? Nathan is dead, Natalia said, feeling tears welling up in her eyes. Wasn't it Nathan who called? No, it was Mrs. Theodora. He's gone, Camilla. You know, he's gone now. The whole story was horrible. Natalia had no idea how to go on living. But even worse was the fact that she hadn't even been able to say goodbye to her boyfriend in a human way. No one, except Mrs. Theodora, knew they had met. Natalia didn't dare go to the funeral. She found out from Mrs. Theodora where and when Nathan would be buried. She arrived at the cemetery at the appointed time and watched everything from afar. Life didn't feel like it for a girl. She didn't know how to go on living. A couple of months later, she realized she was pregnant. Camilla almost choked on her champagne when she heard the news. "Wow, a New Year's gift," she muttered. "What are you going to do?" "Have a baby?" Natalia answered simply. "Give birth?" Camilla exclaimed. "Alone, without your husband?" "Yes," Natalia nodded. Natan was brave. He wasn't afraid of speed or heights. "I have to be worthy of him." Well, but climbing a mountain is 1,000 times easier than having and raising a child. "I can't tell you. You have too many things on your mind." The worst thing was explaining herself to her mother. Cherubina didn't try to dissuade her daughter from her decision, but it was obvious that she was deeply disappointed in Natalia. She hoped that her daughter would go to the city and achieve great things, but she turned out to be an ordinary single mother. "My daughter followed in my footsteps." Cherub shook her head. "Why has this come? Some kind of family curse?" Despite the relationship between the people closest to her, Natalia did not consider her unborn child to be a problem at all. On the contrary, she was glad that she had some memory of Nathan left. Soon after, Natalia found her guardian angel. Or rather, she found him there when she went to the market to get fresh fruit. "Natalia, is that you?" Theodora said in surprise when she met the girl in the lines. "How are you, my God? You're pregnant." Natalia nodded. "With Nathan?" the woman asked quietly. "Of course, Mrs. Theodora." Natalia smiled. "I have always loved only him." "My God!" Theodora whispered again. It seemed that there were no other words left. She invited the girl to her house for tea to talk. Natalia accompanied her willingly. The girl desperately needed the company of someone who knew Nathan as well as she did. Theodora had come to her house when the boy was only 3 years old and treated Nathan as if he were her own son. He was a naughty boy, the woman recalled, stirring the tea with a spoon. Nathan's pranks made the whole house go crazy. He played the role of an airplane pilot or a soldier. Sancho was a little quieter, only books, and when he played with his brother, he always lost. Nathan was cheerful, but he was still a kind and good boy. If I broke something, he helped me clean it up. He kissed me on the cheek in the morning, as if I were his aunt. Things have changed radically at home, you know. Salvador is so busy working that he doesn't even talk to Sancho. Sancho also withdrew into himself. He's a scientist. He's crazy about science. He barely talked to anyone except his brother. They were different, and yet they loved each other. It is difficult to say how long they sat like that, immersed in memories, and which of them cried more. When the tears had dried up and the tea had cooled, Theodora asked, "How are you now, Natalia? What are you going to do? When you give birth, you won't have time to study, and you can't live in a nursing home with a baby." "I don't know," the girl murmured. "I won't give up the baby, but I have no idea what to do. I guess I'll have to go back to my mother in the village and finish school later when the child is older." The woman shook her head. "Now you think there is plenty of time for that, but then you will be very busy with your studies and it will be very hard. First, you will wait for the baby to go to kindergarten, and then he will have school problems. Why don't you move in with me? I have 3 rooms and I live alone. My husband is dead, the children are gone. We will have fun together, and we can take care of the baby together." Not at all, Mrs. Theodora, Natalia exclaimed. This is shameful. I am a complete stranger to you. You owe me nothing. I am doing this for Nathan, the woman replied. Your future son is like a grandson to me. How can I let his life fall apart? If everything goes well for you, he will too. Please don't say no, Natalia. He is very important to me. So they began to live together. At first, Natalia found it strange to live with a stranger, but soon she got used to Theodora and began to consider her mother as well. Natalia named her son Adrian, after her grandfather, who had taken care of her when she was very young. Theodora gladly took on the role of nurse. Although she taught the girl to swaddle and bottle feed the baby, she preferred to do everything herself. She looks so much like Nathan that when she grows up, she will look like him. I hope she lives to see what he will become. Natalia switched to a correspondence course and after a while got a job as a secretary at a small company near her home. However, the job soon disappointed her. The pay was low. The boss kept scolding her at the slightest provocation. Natalia lost sleep and started taking sedatives. Get out of there, Theodora told her firmly after seeing her suffer. I earn well and I have a pension. Can't I feed you? No, Mrs. Theodora. The girl shook her head. I won't sit on your neck. And besides, I have to pay for my studies. Adrian has to buy something. And what are you going to pay if someone needs to leave their job? It's you. You yourself have complained that it's hard for you, that you can't take it anymore. Your back and legs hurt, so quit your job and stay home. Take care of Adrian, who loves you very much. Theodora thought about it for a moment and nodded. It's not a bad idea. I really don't have the right legs, you're right to say. But I don't want to lose such a salary. Salvador has always paid me well, and he gives me all kinds of guarantees on vacation. And in general, he is a good boss, fair, he doesn't fight over anything. What do you suggest? Natalia didn't understand. Take the job in my place, said Mrs. Theodora. I'll tell him everything as it is, that I'm already having trouble working, that I can't keep up. And you, my niece from the village, are looking for work, a good girl. Over the years, we have also become a family. I have replaced your son as a mother. He will listen to me and you will get a job at home. The people there are good. The owners, the cook Laura, the gardener. But Victoria, my partner, is a quarrelsome one. But you will get along with her. Don't talk to her too much. Pretend you are at work and you will be fine. Natalia was frightened by this proposal, not because she was afraid of working. She was used to everything in the village, but she was afraid of being close to her relatives. What if they guessed something or Sancho recognized her? After all, they had met once. How would it look from the outside? Natan's ex-girlfriend had sneaked into the house to ingratiate herself with his relatives and impose her son. And perhaps even claim the inheritance because legally, Adrian is Natan's own son. It doesn't make sense. Theodora waved her hand as the girl shared her fears with her. Anyone who looks at you will understand that you are an angel. Well, that's too much. She was embarrassed. I'm just telling it like it is, Mrs. Theodora replied. Anyway, it's not human to hide Nathan's son. Salvador would probably come back to life if he knew there was a grandson growing up somewhere in the world. Natalia shook her head. I understand, but I'm not ready to come and confess. Hello? I'm your failed daughter-in-law, and this is your grandson. What will he think? He'll probably think I'm only there for the money, and that I'm just trying to court a rich guy to get into a good family, maybe later. That depends on you, Mrs. Theodora replied. But think about work. It's a good place. It's a shame to miss it. When you get trained, you'll find something else. But in the meantime, it wouldn't be a bad idea for you to stay at home. Earn money for your son. Natalia thought about it for 15 days until her boss's insistence became unbearable. I've been thinking about your suggestion and I want to try it, she said to Mrs. Theodora. In any case, I have to meet Natan's family sometime. Maybe if they're really nice people, I'll introduce them to Adrian sometime. I wish I could. Theodora seemed satisfied. Then I'll talk to them tomorrow and take you to meet them on Monday. Don't worry, Salvador just seems tough. He's actually a good person. Everything went exactly as the woman intended. Salvador was, of course, angry to learn that Mrs. Theodora, who had worked in his house for many years, had decided to leave him, but he did not argue. Very well, bring your niece. He sighed. If you can recommend her, perhaps she will be a good girl. Natalia had been dreading this meeting, but it did not go as she expected. Salvador barely greeted her. They signed some documents and Theodora took the girl to see the house. On the first floor are the bedrooms, the teacher's study, and a guest room. On the second floor are the kitchen, dining room, and living room. Hi, Victoria. Meet Natalia, my niece. She'll be replacing me starting tomorrow. For some reason, Natalia expected Victoria to be an older woman, but it turned out that her partner was practically her age. A pretty blonde with blue eyes and a slightly arrogant look. Hi, she nodded. So we're going to work together. She didn't seem very happy with her new partner. Yes, Natalia smiled. I hope we can be friends. Victoria looked at her with the deepest doubt and continued with her work, solemnly carrying the sheets in front of her as if they were a birthday cake. Natalia looked at Theodora and commented, "She doesn't seem friendly." "I warned you." The woman sighed. "Keep in mind that Victoria has her eye on Sancho. She's been watching him and I noticed a while ago, so be careful." "Why should I be careful?" Natalia didn't understand. "I don't need Sancho. Let them do what they want. Whether they do or not, only you and I know." Theodora replied, "You know how jealous girls are. If she thinks you like Sancho, things will happen. So don't go near him. He's not worth it. Do your job honestly, that's all." "You don't have to worry about me," Natalia assured her. "You know I don't need anyone but Adrian. I won't even look in Sancho's direction." She kept her word and immersed herself in her work. At first, Natalia was scared. She was afraid of being exposed. But time passed and nothing terrible happened. Indeed, Salvador was not the same since his work, hiding from the world behind his papers, trying to forget the painful losses. Sancho was increasingly absent from the institute where he taught classes and also did his postgraduate studies. He was rarely at home, but when he was around, Victoria was there too. "What's new at the institute?" she asked with a smile. "How is the thesis going?" "It's moving forward," Sancho answered vaguely. Natalia, who was sometimes present during these conversations, hid a smile. Victoria had no education. She couldn't get into the institute. She didn't go to technical school. It was beneath her dignity. However, she was full of witty expressions, sometimes without even understanding their meaning. "I'd like to be a teacher too." Rolling her eyes, she said, "Or at least a kindergarten teacher. I've always liked teaching children, educating, preferably with affection. Why resort to shouting? Well, the students I work with in the laboratory don't look like children anymore." Sancho smiled. "And a weasel can't do enough with them. I can't imagine patting the head of a bully who's a head taller than me." Natalia couldn't help herself and laughed at the thought. Sancho laughed too. Victoria turned pale with anger, shifting her gaze from side to side. "I just wanted to say that rudeness is not the answer." She corrected herself. "Teaching must be done with the heart." When Sancho left the living room to do other chores in his room, Victoria lunged at her companion. "Why are you laughing, you idiot? Did you decide to make a fool of me in front of Sancho?" Natalia shook her head. "Of course not, Victoria." "Why?" "I imagined Sancho patting some bully on the head and couldn't help myself. I can't imagine him as a good babysitter." "You're lying," Victoria snapped. "Do you think I don't see it? You've got your eye on Sancho and you're bothering me with your jokes." From then on, Natalia disliked her even more. She constantly made some kind of jokes in her speech, and even just lavishing icy silence. By then, Natalia had been working in the house for several years and would have been used to Victoria's bad temper. But the whole situation was very annoying to her. And then, Mrs. Theodora fell ill. One day, she had gotten soaked in the rain, had contracted bronchitis, and had no way of looking after Adrian. Natalia knew that the idea of taking her son to work would end in disaster. After listening to Victoria's conversation with Salvador and making sure that the storm had temporarily passed, the girl returned to the kitchen and was surprised to find Sancho there. The boy was leaning over Adrian's sketchbook and drawing passionately on the paper with a pencil. "Mom, we're drawing!" the boy exclaimed happily. "I haven't done this for a long time," Sancho confessed. "I've tried it now and it's very interesting. After all, psychologists recommend art therapy for a reason." "It's very nice," Natalia said as she looked at the drawing. "Who drew what?" Adrian pointed to the crooked chest. "Here, that's me, and the bunny belongs to Mr. Sancho." Natalia shuddered at the address, and the man smiled. "I've always painted like a chicken with its foot. You probably would never have been able to tell whose drawing each was, would you?" The rules of etiquette forced Natalia to politely back off and say that Sancho is the best painter in the world. But the girl smiled on the contrary. "Yes, I can't be Aviasovsky, but it's the best. I can't stand academic painting." Victoria peeked into the kitchen, but when she saw Sancho with his companion, she looked angrily and flew out. "What was that?" Sancho asked. "Don't pay attention to him. He's in a bad mood today," Natalia muttered. She made a face at the thought of Victoria. How much longer would they fight like cats and dogs? Sancho looked at his watch. "Okay, I have to run too. I have an important talk today. A bunch of professors are meeting. You could say my fate depends on it. Good luck." Natalia nodded and spoke with complete sincerity. She felt good about Sancho. She thought that under different circumstances, she could be his friend. Sancho reminded her of Sabino. He was the same scholar, only more subtly intelligent. At least Natalia couldn't imagine a situation like that Sancho would turn to drink for a bet. The house was silent for a while. Natalia was vacuuming the living room. Victoria didn't show her face. Angry, probably somewhere on the upper floors, the kitchen bell rang then. "Mum, the phone is ringing," Adrian shouted. "I hear you, darling, I hear you," the girl replied. "Don't shout so loud, please. Don't forget that we are playing hide and seek here." She picked up the phone. "Hello?" The caller was Sancho, who wasted no time on formalities. "Natalia, thank God you are there." "What happened?" the girl said in surprise. "I had a real disaster. It takes a long time to explain, but my laptop died and I urgently need a replacement. Otherwise, my report may be lost." "Don't you have any more laptops at the institute?" Natalia asked. "Unfortunately, no." Sancho smiled sadly. "I've made a fancy presentation that weighs more than all the other documents on the flash drive put together. The old local laptops wouldn't be able to handle it." "What can be done?" Natalia asked. "If you don't mind, pick up the laptop from my brother's room and bring it here, please. The show is in half an hour. Take a taxi. It'll be faster. I'll pay for the trip." "But I can't. I have work to do," the girl murmured in confusion. "What will they say when they find out that I left without asking?" "I'll talk to my father. He'll understand." "Natalia, help me, please." "Okay, I'll do it." The girl murmured and hung up. Then she looked at her son. "Adrian, I have to go out for a moment. Will you wait for me here?" The boy nodded with unprecedented seriousness. "Thank you, good boy." Natalia smiled. "And remember what we talked about. Sit quietly, don't shout, and don't run. And Victoria, if she shows up, don't even go near her. Pretend to be invisible, okay?" Adrian nodded again. "Very well, mother." Entering Nathan's room, Natalia felt an involuntary shudder. She very rarely cleaned here. There was no need to rearrange the sheets. There was no need to water the flowers. And yet, every time, even on Natalia's threshold, it seemed that the owner of the room was alive and was about to appear from somewhere around the corner and absent-mindedly smile at her. The laptop was on the table, vainly awaiting its owner's return. Natalia grabbed it, hugged it to her chest, and after a few moments of hesitation ran out into the street. All the way to the institute, she mentally hurried the taxi and asked the organizers of the shoot to wait a little and start the event later. An excited Sancho waited for the girl outside. "I owe you one," Sancho said gratefully. Natalia followed his gaze and got back into the taxi. The workday was over. She had to pick up Adrian and go home. The next day started strangely. Theodora was still not feeling well, and Natalia had to take Adrian to work with her again. Victoria, who joined her in the kitchen, smiled enigmatically. She said in a significant tone. Natalia did not know what that meant and walked past her in silence. Next was Sancho. He too looked towards the kitchen for some reason and stopped as if he saw a girl for the first time. "Hello?" Natalia smiled. "How was the report?" "Good." The boy nodded. "Thanks again for all your help." Contrary to usual, he didn't stay to chat with her. There was a look of astonishment on Sancho's face, a daze that Natalia didn't know how to describe. At lunchtime, she was summoned by Salvador. Natalia was heading to the teacher's office and had no idea what they were going to talk to her about. Was she going to be punished for bringing a boy home? But nothing bad had happened. Adrian hadn't broken things. He hadn't made any noises or mischief, so why would he be punishing Salvador? The man was sitting at his desk as usual. Natalia entered the study and cradled her son in her arms. Victoria remained standing beside her. Salvador looked at her, not sternly, but wearily, and asked, "Is there something you want to tell me, Natalia?" She shook her head. "I don't believe it. What is it about? Are you angry because I brought my son to your house?" "Not that," the man muttered without even looking at Adrian. "It's just that every day there are more rumors about you. Very interesting, I would say. I told Salvador that you took the laptop from Nathan's room." Victoria reported satisfied. "And you ran away from home with it. Can you explain what that means?" Natalia was about to laugh with relief. She wanted to answer, but Sancho beat her to it. "I'll explain it to you." He entered his father's office and stood next to Natalia. He looked at her smiling and said, "Dad, this girl was Nathan's girlfriend, and her son is your grandson. If you don't believe me, look at the boy yourself. He looks like my brother and your son." Victoria looked stunned, as if she had been thrown into a basin of water. Natalia looked at Sancho in astonishment. "How did you know?" she whispered. "From the laptop," Sancho answered. "More specifically from the photos I found in it. There was a huge file. Yesterday I looked in it after reading the report. I wanted to put my nerves in order, and I ended up with an even bigger shock. You were the girl with the broken knee. How did I not recognize you immediately?" They looked at Salvador. They waited to see what he said. The man looked at Adrian and tears slowly rolled down his cheeks. "The spitting image of Nathan as a child," Salvador whispered. Everything ended well. Victoria resigned the same day, not wanting to stay in a house where everyone, she said, was against her. Salvador was not willing to part with his grandson and kept asking Natalia how she had lived all these years. Of course, the girl did not stay with them as a housekeeper. At first, she was a good friend of the family. Salvador called her daughter, and a few years later she married Sancho. The young people were very close. They were serious and calm. A year later, Natalia gave birth to Sancho's daughter. Sometimes she fondly remembered her first love, but she moved on, because life, no matter what happens, flows smoothly forward, and many happy years await the family. If you liked the story, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel.